Evelyn Harper sat at the head of the long mahogany table, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The room filled with the glow of string lights and the scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon. Christmas dinner looked perfect. Michael, her husband, stood and tapped his butter knife against his wine glass, drawing the attention of their guests. "I have a little something for my lovely wife," he said, smiling too widely. The room chuckled lightly, assuming he was about to give her a necklace, maybe a heartfelt note. Evelyn smiled politely. She already knew what was coming. Michael reached into his blazer pocket and pulled out a plain white envelope. No ribbon. No card. He placed it in front of her like he was handing over a prize. "Merry Christmas, babe." Evelyn picked it up slowly, her face calm. She opened it and scanned the top line. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Already signed. Already filed. A hush fell across the table. Someone coughed. His best friend Nate stifled a laugh. Michael looked at Evelyn, clearly waiting for a reaction. A tear, perhaps. A breakdown. Something dramatic. But Evelyn didn't flinch. She reached into her purse, pulled out a silver pen, and signed the papers with a steady hand. Then she dated them, capped the pen, and slid the envelope back across the table. "Thank you," she said softly. Michael blinked. "That's it." "That's it," she replied, her voice unwavering. Then, without another word, she reached under the table and pulled out a gold-wrapped box. She placed it gently in front of him. "What's this?" he asked, confused. "Your real gift," she said. Everyone watched as he tore off the wrapping paper and opened the leather folder inside. His face shifted. The color drained slowly as he read. It was the prenup. The one he drunkenly signed nearly a year ago. The one he thought was a joke. But it wasn't. Evelyn looked at him calmly. "Merry Christmas, Michael." And just like that, the illusion he thought he controlled shattered like glass. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. She had already won. From the outside, Evelyn and Michael Harper looked like the perfect couple. Two professionals with a beautiful home, a busy social life, and a polished presence at every party. But the truth had sharp edges hidden behind polished smiles. It hadn't always been this way. In the early years, Michael had a charm that could light up any room. He was witty, magnetic. Even Evelyn's friends said she was lucky, and for a while she believed them. But little comments began to slip through, always wrapped in humor. At a dinner party, he joked, "You know I could leave you tomorrow, right?" and squeezed her shoulder like it was just banter. Everyone laughed. So did she. But inside, something in her curled inward, a knot forming beneath her ribs. When she wore a red dress to a company event, he whispered in her ear, "Trying too hard, aren't we?" She never wore it again. He never yelled. Never raised a hand. Michael's power was subtler than that. His words came dipped in sarcasm, delivered with a clink of his whiskey glass. "Don't embarrass me in front of my boss. You're lucky I'm still here. What would you even do without me?" So each one landed like a stone in water, rippling long after the room had gone quiet. Evelyn had learned to smile, to nod, to make excuses. When her childhood friend Carla heard one of his comments at a barbecue, she pulled Evelyn aside. "He doesn't have to mean it for it to hurt. You look like you're disappearing." Maybe she was. Evelyn started missing book club. She stopped answering her sister's calls. Her world grew smaller, orbiting around Michael's moods, his rules, his preferences. If her mother came to visit, Michael would make loud comments about the messy kitchen. If Evelyn forgot to pick up dry cleaning, he muttered just loud enough, "Useless." But she stayed. Because he wasn't cheating. Because he wasn't violent. Because maybe this was what marriage looked like after the honeymoon stage. So slow fade of self-worth was so quiet, so incremental, that Evelyn didn't even notice how much of herself she'd given away. How her laughter had become automatic. How she tiptoed through conversations, always bracing for a correction. Michael liked control not in the loud, dramatic way people imagined, but in the quiet shifts of power, the rewrites of truth that made her doubt her own instincts. She once told herself, "At least he doesn't scream. At least he's not cruel." But eventually she realized emotional erosion didn't need volume. It just needed time. And Michael had plenty of that. What he didn't have, though, was the foresight to realize that Evelyn quiet, composed Evelyn was beginning to take notes. Not just mentally. Literally. The turning point didn't come with a bang, it came with bubbles. It was Michael's company's winter gala, and Evelyn wore a sleek black dress she'd picked out weeks earlier. 2 glasses of champagne in, she was smiling on cue, floating through conversations like she always did. But her smile didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. They stood near the edge of the ballroom when Michael leaned in, eyes glassy with alcohol. He glanced at a woman across the room, then muttered under his breath, "You're just like the rest of them. Clingy, always wanting more." Evelyn froze. She didn't ask what he meant, she rarely did anymore. She simply walked to the bar, ordered a glass of water, and returned with the same calm expression. Later that night, when they got home, Michael slammed the door and went straight to the liquor cabinet. Evelyn followed quietly, poured him another drink, and handed it to him with the kind of grace she had rehearsed 1,000 times. "You know," she said lightly, "you always joke about leaving me. Maybe we should sign something. Just in case." Michael burst out laughing. "You really think I need a prenup to protect my fantasy football winnings?" he teased, scribbling his signature on a cocktail napkin and tossing it aside. Then he passed out on the couch. By morning, he didn't remember the napkin. But Evelyn did. She carefully slid it into her purse and left the house while he was still snoring. Carla met her at a small notary office downtown, said nothing, and simply handed her a pen. Evelyn signed, and the napkin became a legal document, an accidental prenup, but enforceable under state law due to its clarity and signature. She placed the notarized version in a fireproof envelope, stored it behind a file labeled Tax Receipts 2020, and emailed a scanned copy to a private address Carla had helped her set up years earlier. That night, she made dinner like usual. She laughed at Michael's stories, nodded through his self-praise, and wiped down the counters while he watched TV. But something inside her had shifted. She no longer looked at him with fear or even hurt. She looked at him with calculation. He had handed her the pen, and she had written the first line of her freedom. After that night, Evelyn didn't change overnight, at least not in a way anyone could see. There were no slammed doors or heated arguments, just small, quiet decisions, intentional ones. She bought a plain, spiral-bound notebook. No quotes, no flowers, just lined pages and a black cover. She slid it beneath her side of the mattress, right next to the edge where Michael never looked. And every evening, after the house settled and the TV dulled in the background, she'd open it and write. She recorded everything. The tone in his voice when he called her dramatic for expressing a need. The time he came home at 1:13 a.m., smelling of tequila and perfume. The sarcastic remark at dinner, "If we split, you'll be crawling back. You can't even fix the Wi-Fi without me." She wrote it all down. No emotion, no commentary, just facts. She also began scanning receipts, logging dates, collecting screenshots. She stored everything in a secure cloud folder Carla helped her set up. Evidence, not anger. Patterns, not pain. One night, she found a receipt in the pocket of his jeans, a luxury hotel, 2 glasses of wine, chocolate-covered strawberries. Valentine's Day. He'd told her he was traveling for work. She didn't confront him. She didn't cry. She just scanned it, logged it, and moved on. She started recording certain phone calls, only the ones where he let the mask slip. The ones where his laughter sounded too cruel. She labeled each file by date and cataloged them with quiet precision. To everyone else, she looked like the same supportive wife, but in reality, she was building a parachute. A carefully folded plan stitched with evidence and patience. She even bought a small daily planner and began marking symbols in the margins. An X for nights he came home late. A star for questionable transactions. A dot for every provable lie. It looked like a normal to-do list, but to Evelyn it was a map. A survival blueprint. She had learned not to react. She had become a mirror reflecting exactly what Michael wanted to see: compliance, silence, ease. But beneath the surface she was sharpening. Not out of spite. Out of preparation. Because when you live in a house made of cracks, you don't wait for it to collapse. You learn when to jump. 2 weeks before Christmas, the last piece of the puzzle fell quietly into place. Michael had come home late again, muttering something about a client dinner and traffic. He left his phone on the coffee table, face up, screen still glowing. Evelyn, seated across the room, folding laundry, saw it light up with a message. From a contact saved only as M. She doesn't suspect a thing. I'll file on Christmas. Want front row seats. Attached, a laughing emoji and a gif of a woman sobbing into tissues. Evelyn didn't blink. She calmly picked up the phone, took a screenshot, and emailed it to herself. Then she deleted the message from the thread. When Michael returned from the bathroom, she was already in the kitchen, preparing lasagna, his favorite. He kissed her cheek, oblivious. She smiled back. That night, lying beside him in bed, Evelyn stared at the ceiling. She thought about the candles on the table, the turkey already prepped in the fridge, the gifts wrapped beneath the tree. He thought Christmas was going to be the stage for her collapse. But what he didn't know, what he could never have guessed, was that she had chosen that stage too. He wasn't the only one planning a performance. The next day, she visited Carla's office with the napkin agreement, her evidence folder, and a clear mind. Carla scanned through everything, then looked up. He signed this willingly. Evelyn nodded. Carla leaned back, her expression shifting from lawyer to friend. It's airtight, she said. But let's make it stronger. They spent hours drafting an addendum clarifying gray areas, reinforcing language, and adding provisions Michael would never expect: voluntary terms, spousal protections, financial distributions, even witness notes. Everything was backed by metadata, dates, and clean signatures. When they were done, Carla handed Evelyn a flash drive, a printed copy, and something even more valuable, a look of quiet admiration. He gave you the knife, Carla said. You just waited for the right moment to use it. Evelyn didn't smile. She didn't need to. Because in that moment she wasn't thinking about revenge. She was thinking about safety, about certainty, and about how peaceful it felt to finally be prepared. The dining table sparkled under the soft glow of candlelight, silverware gleamed. Plates were full. Laughter flowed like the spiced wine her sister brought. Everything looked perfect on the surface. Evelyn moved gracefully between the guests, topping off glasses, smiling with practiced ease. Underneath her calm exterior, her legs trembled not from fear but anticipation. She caught Michael's eye across the table as he carved the turkey. He winked, smug, as if the entire night was a joke only he was in on. Then came the moment. Michael tapped his butter knife against his glass and stood. Before dessert, he began, I have a little surprise for my wife. Gasps of delight rippled through the room. Evelyn's sister clapped. Their guests smiled expectantly. Michael reached into his blazer and pulled out a white envelope. Plain, no ribbon, no card. He laid it in front of Evelyn with a smirk. Merry Christmas, sweetheart. The room went quiet. Evelyn looked at the envelope, then calmly opened it. Her eyes scanned the header. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Already signed, already filed. She nodded softly, reached into her clutch, and pulled out a sleek silver pen. Without a word, she signed it, dated it, capped the pen, and handed the envelope back across the table. Thank you, she said, her voice as smooth as the wine in her glass. Michael blinked. That's it. That's it. Then, with graceful precision, she reached beneath the table and brought out a gold-wrapped box. She placed it gently between his plate and his pride. What's this? He asked, his voice wavering slightly. Your real gift, Evelyn replied. He opened it slowly. Inside was a leather folder. He flipped it open and froze. There, in crisp print and bold signatures, was the prenup. The original napkin agreement, fully notarized, with the reinforced legal addendum attached. Evelyn watched as the color drained from his face. What is this? Michael muttered, eyes darting across the room, hoping someone might laugh, say it was a joke. But no one did. She leaned forward, calm and composed. It's the agreement you signed last year. Updated. Filed. Legally binding. I filed first, he said, like a child insisting the rules weren't fair. Exactly, she replied, smiling. Which makes this legally valid under your own terms. A hush swept across the room. Michael's best friend shifted in his seat. Evelyn's sister looked stunned. Someone dropped a fork. Evelyn reached into her purse once more. One more thing. She placed a small envelope beside his now cold plate. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a sonogram photo. I'm 8 weeks pregnant, Evelyn said softly. Michael stared, speechless. You planned this, he finally whispered. She met his eyes. No, I prepared. Michael's hands trembled as he held the sonogram photo, the same hands that had once confidently signed contracts and closed deals without flinching. But now, they couldn't hold a single square of glossy paper steady. Evelyn sat perfectly still. "I'm 8 weeks pregnant," she repeated, her voice clear, steady. "Due in July." For a brief second, something flickered across Michael's face. A crack, a smile trying to form. But it didn't last. Because the reality caught up fast. Prenup, signed and sealed. Reinforced terms. A baby on the way. Custody. Child support. Control slipping from every direction. "So you planned this," he said again, barely above a whisper. But the words held no weight anymore. Evelyn looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You bet I'd cry," she said. "You laughed, called me predictable." She leaned back, letting silence settle in the space between them. "I didn't plan this, Michael. I prepared. There's a difference." Around the table, no one spoke. His best friend Nate looked away, clearly uncomfortable. Evelyn's sister Beth reached under the table, her fingers brushing against Evelyn's hand in quiet solidarity. Michael's mother, who had once gushed about Evelyn's poise at dinner parties, sat stiffly with her mouth slightly open, unsure where to look. Michael tried to speak again, but nothing came out. Across the table, Evelyn reached for her glass of wine, not to toast, not to provoke. She took a sip because it was warm, laced with cinnamon and comfort, and she was finally tasting freedom. "You think you've won?" Michael said at last, voice hollow. Evelyn didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because this wasn't about winning. This was about reclaiming. Her breath, her space, her choices, her life. She stood gently clearing dessert plates that had gone untouched. Her movements were calm, methodical. "Apple or pecan?" she asked the table, as if nothing had happened at all. No one answered. They didn't need to. Because in that moment, everyone understood, the man who once believed he held all the power had just been handed his own undoing, served in silence, strength, and soft-spoken certainty. And Evelyn? She wasn't broken. She was just getting started. The next morning, Evelyn woke to a house that was still and silent but not heavy. Not tense, just quiet. Michael was gone. No note, no message, just an empty hook where his keys once hung and a half-folded sweater left on the edge of the bed. She made herself coffee, her own blend, not the one he insisted on. For the first time in years, she didn't second-guess the sound of the toaster, didn't wonder if he'd snap about the dishes or scoff at the way she buttered her toast. By 9 a.m., she called a locksmith. "Emergency or standard?" the man asked. "Standard," she said, then paused. "But please come today." That afternoon, as the locksmith changed the locks with careful hands, Evelyn stood in the doorway holding Michael's old keys. "Make sure none of these work anymore," she said softly. When he left, she held the new key in her palm like it was the first thing she'd owned alone in years. Not the house, not yet. But the certainty, the freedom. That night, she moved into the master bedroom. She stripped the bed, opened every window, and let the December air sweep through. The scent of Michael's cologne faded slowly, replaced by the subtle comfort of sandalwood candles she once loved before he claimed they gave him headaches. She lit 3. Set them on the dresser. And stood back to watch the shadows dance across the walls. The following days passed in soft rhythms. She sorted through the mail red stamped envelopes addressed to Michael, past due. She stacked them neatly by the door. She forwarded none. Carla called one evening, her voice bright. "You won't believe this," she said, half laughing. His lawyer called. He nearly fell out of his chair when he realized what you've been sitting on. Evelyn smiled, curling into her blanket. "Is it official?" "He's lost 70% of the marital assets," Carla said. And with a baby on the way, she let the sentence linger. Evelyn didn't respond immediately, not because she didn't care, but because the money wasn't the victory. The victory was the silence in her own home, the absence of dread, the warmth that came from within, not in spite of fear, but because fear had finally left. "I'm proud of you," Carla said gently. Evelyn closed her eyes. And for the first time in years, she truly exhaled. The fallout wasn't explosive. It came like melting snow, quiet, steady, irreversible. Some friends stopped calling. Others sent carefully worded texts, filled with disclaimers like "I'm not taking sides, but..." But there were surprises too. One woman Evelyn hadn't spoken to in years messaged, "I wish I had your strength." A bouquet of peonies arrived at her doorstep, no note attached, just a tiny card that read, "About time." She smiled. Claire Michaels' assistant. Of course she knew. At his office, the shift was swift. The man who once joked about training wives like interns now walked alone at lunch. His swagger dimmed. His jokes landed flat. Even Nate, his loyal sidekick, stopped laughing. Datha's husband, always polite but observant, mentioned it during dinner one night. "He's different," he said, like something cracked. Evelyn didn't reply. She simply sipped her tea and nodded. She began reclaiming the house one corner at a time. She painted the nursery a soft sage green, the color Michael once called pointless. She bought string lights for the windows, placed a stuffed giraffe in the corner, and lit candles after dinner. She began humming again while folding laundry. Bought new bed sheets white, with tiny gold stars. Slept diagonally across the mattress because now she could. One afternoon she saw Michael on the street outside a bank. He looked tired, distracted. He didn't see her. Or maybe he did, but didn't know what to say. Later, Carla forwarded her a screenshot. Michael's name had been quietly removed from his firm's quarterly newsletter. No announcement, just absence. Evelyn responded with a simple thumbs-up emoji. That evening, she stood barefoot in the kitchen, watching the curtains sway in the breeze. Not because she was dramatic or broken or seeking revenge, but because she was finally unburdened. It wasn't about proving him wrong anymore. It wasn't even about justice. It was about freedom. The slow, soft kind. The kind you grow into like new skin. The kind that makes you realize the biggest triumph isn't in the moment they lose, it's in the moment you stop needing them too. And Evelyn? She didn't just survive. She rebuilt. With quiet strength. And without looking back. The following Christmas looked different. Smaller, quieter, warmer. The long dramatic table was gone, replaced by a round one in the sunlit corner of the dining room. No towering centerpieces, no forced toasts, just family, real, present, and soft around the edges. Beth brought her toddler, who spent most of the meal gleefully dropping mashed potatoes on the floor and yelling, oh, like it was the punchline to a magic trick. Evelyn's father carved the turkey while Carla, for the first time in years, brought a date. A kind man with kind eyes. Evelyn didn't feel envy. She felt full. And next to her sister's son sat a new high chair, white with tiny yellow stars cradling Evelyn's greatest joy. Her daughter. She had Michael's eyes, maybe, but everything else, her cheeks, her grip, her calm intensity, was pure Evelyn. During dessert, Evelyn sat by the fireplace, her daughter asleep on her chest, wrapped in a soft knitted blanket. The others had wandered into the kitchen or stepped out for a walk, but she stayed behind, holding peace like it was something sacred. She looked down at the small rise and fall of her daughter's breath, kissed her forehead, and whispered into her downy hair. "He once told me I'd be nothing without him," she said softly. Her daughter stirred slightly. Evelyn smiled. "Turns out," she continued, "I'm everything without him." No bitterness, just truth. She didn't need applause. She didn't need him to see it. She didn't even need an apology. What she needed, what she had built, was a life where she no longer braced herself, where she didn't walk on glass or hide her journals or shrink her voice. And for the first time in years, her silence wasn't something that swallowed her. It was something she chose. Not as a shield, but as a sanctuary. Because the real revenge wasn't the prenup, or the frozen look on Michael's face, or even the sonogram dropped like a mic. The real revenge was healing. Peace. And the simple, unshakable fact that she never needed permission to begin again. If Evelyn's story moved you, leave a like. Share it with someone who needs to know they're stronger than they think. And tell us in the comments. What would you have done at that dinner table? Subscribe to The Art of Revenge for more stories of quiet strength and perfect timing.